Mist clings to the Carpathian peaks like grave cloth. It never lifts. These mountains have been the one frontier Rome could not intimidate, the one border where a powerful, organized kingdom looked back at the empire not with fear, but with ambition. And now, the Emperor Trajan stares north into that mist, carrying a grudge 15 years old. Somewhere beyond those peaks sit the lost eagles of Rome. Not lost in battle glory, lost in humiliation. An entire legion shattered. Its sacred eagles lost. A treaty so shameful that Rome still had to buy peace. The treaty wasn't a demand for surrender, it was a paid ceasefire. Rome shipped gold, craftsmen, and weapons north every year, paying a mountain kingdom for the privilege of not being invaded. For 15 years, that shame sat like a stone in Rome's throat. Now Trajan means to cut it out. He marched with the legions before he ever ruled them, and he's brought the largest army Rome has assembled in a generation. Some ancient sources put it past 100,000 men. Enough engineers, and enough steel to industrialize the business of war. On the other side of the mountains waits a kingdom that humiliated Rome once already, and has spent 15 years turning its own mountains into a fortress no army has ever cracked. This isn't just a war. It's Rome trying to heal a wound that's been open for a decade and a half. Today, we walk into the Carpathians with Trajan's legions, into a frontier where even victory will come at a brutal cost. To understand why Trajan is here, you have to rewind. Back to a war that began with a Dacian raid across the Danube, and an emperor who turned a response into a catastrophe. 87 AD. Emperor Domitian, eager for a decisive military triumph after a mixed frontier record, sent his Praetorian prefect Cornelius Fuscus across the Danube. 5 legions, by some accounts. An invasion built on ego. It walked straight into a trap. At the Battle of Tapae, the Dacian king Decebalus tore the Roman column apart. Fuscus was killed. The elite Legio Violati was gutted. And when the dust settled, Roman eagles, the sacred standards of Rome itself, sat in Dacian hands. To the Roman military, that wasn't just a defeat. It was sacrilege. Domitian tried to save face with more campaigns. It didn't work. By 89 AD, the peace that followed still looked like defeat. Rome agreed to ship gold, craftsmen, and weapons north every year, just to keep Decebalus from crossing the river again. Trajan watched that shame play out, and unlike Domitian, he'd earned his authority in the mud, not the palace. But Trajan hadn't spent years planning this war just to avenge a dead general. He'd studied the maps. He knew what sat beyond those mountains, some of the richest gold and silver deposits in Europe, already pouring wealth into Dacian treasuries. Before we follow Trajan's legions into the mountains, you need to understand exactly what they're walking into. Because Dacia isn't just a kingdom. It's a fortress that God himself seems to have built. The Carpathian Mountains curl around the Dacian heartland like a closed fist. Narrow passes. Sheer cliffs. Forests so dense a legion can vanish into them and never come out. For any invader, this terrain isn't an obstacle. It's a weapon. Every valley is a killing ground. Every ridge is a watchtower. The mountains have already disarmed you before the first sword is drawn. And behind that wall waits something worse than terrain. Picture a blade nearly a meter long, curved like a sickle, fixed to a wooden shaft long enough for a two-handed grip. Swung with both hands and a warrior's full body weight behind it. This was the Falx. It wasn't designed to stab through a shield the way a Roman gladius was. It was designed to go over it, arcing down and over the top edge of a scutum to open a man from shoulder to collarbone in a single stroke. Roman shields, Roman armor, all the standardized equipment that had let the legions crush enemy after enemy across 3 continents, none of it had been built with this weapon in mind. Decebalus isn't some tribal chief gambling on brute force. He's a strategist who studies Rome the way a physician studies a disease. He spent years not just raiding the empire, but digesting its lessons. He fortifies Sarmizegetusa not just with walls, but by absorbing Roman deserters and engineers, turning his mountain capital into a fortress that learns from every siege Rome has ever won. Stone walls. Multiple defensive rings. A capital built specifically to make a siege as expensive as possible. Terrain that swallows armies. A weapon Rome had no answer for. This is what Trajan marched his legions into. In the spring of 101 AD, Trajan's army reached the Danube, and immediately solved something that had stopped Roman armies for years. For Dacia, the Danube had always been a shield. A wide, cold barrier that made invasion slow and costly. Trajan looked at that same river and saw something else entirely, a road waiting to be built. His engineers lashed together a bridge of boats, hundreds of vessels, hull to hull, planked over into a single crossing wide enough for 100,000 men and their supply trains in a matter of days. The legions pushed deeper into the Dacian heartland, grinding their way through the Oresti Mountains, heavily fortified valleys where roads had to be engineered or cleared by the Roman army itself. The first major collision came at Tapae, one of the narrow gateway passes into Dacia's interior. In that tight defile, numbers meant nothing. Falx-wielding warriors met the legions in ground too cramped for Roman formations to spread. Shields built for stabbing contests kept meeting a blade that didn't care about the shield at all. Roman casualties mounted so fast that Trajan himself reportedly tore up his own cloak for bandages when medical supplies ran out. Roman discipline eventually forced the pass, but at a terrible cost. Decebalus, his army bloodied but unbroken, retreated deeper into the mountains and waited. Then the snows came. Winter halted major operations, but Trajan's army wasn't camped safely on the frontier. It was scattered across captured strongpoints deep inside hostile territory, holding ground it had bled for and could not afford to give back. The legions were stretched thin, locked into precarious forward positions rather than cozy winter camps. That was exactly the moment Decebalus struck. He cut a deal with the Roxolani Sarmatians and the Buri, forging a coalition beyond the Dacian core. In the winter of 101 to 102 AD, with the legions bogged down and freezing conditions making rapid reinforcement nearly impossible, Decebalus launched a massive diversionary assault directly across the Danube. The joint Dacian-Sarmatian army crossed the frozen river on foot to strike the Roman province of Moesia Inferior, hundreds of miles from where Trajan's army sat pinned down in the mountains. Supply depots were hit and stripped bare. Messengers carrying word of the attacks were ambushed before they ever reached Trajan's camp. For weeks, entire garrisons sat cut off and undersupplied, with no idea if help was coming, or if Rome had already written them off. Decebalus had bled Rome on two fronts. Trajan's answer wasn't panic. It was the ruthless application of a system already in place. The Danube, already tamed by his fleet of transports and pontoon bridges, became the artery of his counterpunch. While Decebalus was still celebrating his raid, Trajan was moving legions by water, not to chase shadows in the mountains, but to annihilate the Sarmatian allies who had crossed the river. He didn't just defend the line. He erased the threat. Then came the second problem, the Falx itself. The legions were learning what Trajan already knew: to beat Dacia, you had to survive the Falx. Roman smiths began welding crude iron cross braces onto helmets, not in a single order, but piecemeal, wherever a legionary had a chance of surviving a first encounter. This wasn't a clean technological solution. It was desperate, brutal field adaptation, spreading through the ranks as men looked at the bodies of their dead friends and tried to figure out how not to join them. Rome had fixed its supply lines. Rome had fixed its helmets. Now it was ready to finish what it started. The first war ended with Decebalus on his knees, but the peace was only a breathing spell. He used the years of truce to rebuild his fortresses, rearm his warriors, and launch fresh raids across the Danube. When the treaty lay in tatters, Trajan returned, this time with a permanent stone bridge to supply his advance and a single objective: the annihilation of the Dacian kingdom. By 106 AD, the legions stood before Sarmizegetusa Regia, Decebalus's mountain capital. Perched high in the Oresti Mountains, built across multiple terraces, its stone and timber walls followed the natural contours of the ridge. Towers positioned to turn every approach into a killing field. Taking it by direct assault would have cost Trajan an army he no longer had to spare. So Rome didn't assault it. Roman engineers traced the fortress's water supply to a pipeline cut through solid rock and hidden along the ridgeline, and severed it without hesitation. Inside those walls, the defenders didn't die from a single blow. They died from thirst. From the creeping realization that no relief was coming, and no well ran deep enough to save them. When the walls finally fell, Decebalus refused to be the trophy of a Roman triumph. Cornered by Roman cavalry after the capital's collapse, he took his own life with a blade rather than be dragged in chains through the streets of Rome. The king was dead. The war was over. What came next would outlast them both. Dacia became a Roman province. Its gold mines poured wealth into the imperial treasury, plundered treasure that financed public works across the empire. Roman settlers followed the legions north, bringing Latin and Roman law with them. Over centuries, the provincial culture that emerged would contribute its own thread to the complex tapestry that eventually produced the Romanian language and people. Years later, Trajan made certain the victory would never be forgotten. By 113 AD, a column nearly 100 feet tall rose in the heart of Rome, wrapped in a carved spiral that told the entire war in stone. Over 150 scenes, not only combat, but the unglamorous work that won the war, the Great Danube Bridge, the fortified helmets some legionaries adopted to survive the Falx, and the siege lines that choked a mountain fortress into submission. Frozen in marble, spiraling toward the sky, so that no one who walked past it could ever mistake this victory for a simple story of soldiers and swords. The column still stands in Rome today. If you like this video, hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And subscribe if you want more deep dives into history's greatest battles and forgotten empires.